Back in 2003 at Gartner, I coined the term next generation firewall in a research note because of all the vulnerability seeking attacks we were seeing back then that were getting through first generation firewalls. In 2009, Greg Young and I wrote the note with the definition that added application awareness and intrusion prevention to the definition. As we look at the way the attacks are proceeding, in a few years we'll need a new definition of next generation firewall.
In your opinion, what are the key features of a next-generation firewall?
The very first generation of firewalls were just packet filters, blocking certain sources from getting certain destinations. The generation after that added stateful awareness and port protocol processing to stop that generation of threats. And next-generation firewalls, to deal with vulnerability-seeking attacks, advanced targeted attacks, have had to add a number of features. They've had to add IPS features, very high performance, deep packet inspection. They've had to add application awareness, not just of the applications businesses use, but of the threat applications as well. Those are the really key ones. Beyond that, other features such as user identity and the ability to take inputs on vulnerabilities and other user and device information is very key.
Why was it necessary to define a new generation of firewalls?
There's two different reasons why all security controls, including next-generation firewalls, have to evolve. The first is the threats don't stand still. Today, the bad guys are thinking of new ways to attack virtualized systems, hypervisors, or attack mobile applications, or attack HTML5, or every new technology coming along. So we know new threats will evolve that we can't even think of today. The other thing is IT evolves. The way business wants to use IT evolves. The definition of a perimeter evolves. Today we see much more use of bring your own device, employee-owned devices allowed to come into the perimeter or work be done from outside the perimeter. We see a lot more use of cloud-based services, and we see a lot more virtualized data centers. So the way IT is deploying IT changes, that means firewalls will have to evolve to stop not just new threats, but also to work in new IT environments such as virtualized data centers, virtualized PCs, or actually protecting cloud-based IT.
What are the key considerations for choosing a next-generation firewall?
Firewalls are a very highly penetrated market. Most businesses have a firewall on every internet connection. So typically a business today that's going to look at deploying a next generation firewall is replacing something else. Now there's a couple scenarios. Might be simply replacing a first generation firewall, or they might be replacing a firewall plus a separate intrusion prevention appliance that's been used in conjunction with that. So there's a couple different things to think about in either scenario. Certainly first is performance. Combining deep packet inspection, application awareness, and good firewall processing means lots of processor power is required, generally lots of memory is required, and a very high performance solution is needed. So number one is to look at performance and functionality together. Number two is to look at the policy language and user interface. Going from the 5-tuple of first generation firewalls to adding application awareness and granular feature control can be very confusing. Definitely changes the way firewall policies are written and reviewed and processed. So it's very important to look at that policy language and user interface. And then finally, it's very important to think about how you will keep track of what applications your business demands to be supported, to be allowed through the firewall, and what features do need to be blocked or monitored or filtered using the next generation firewall to select the best product, but also to plan out how much resources it's going to take you to manage and maintain a next generation firewall.
How important is the role of testing when choosing a next generation firewall?
Whenever enterprises look at buying a network security product, it's very important to get a realistic test of the capabilities and the performance. Now, there's really three ways of doing that. One is there are some magazines that publish reports and compare products. Unfortunately today those are not very useful. The magazines aren't doing a great job anymore. There's some independent labs out there, NSS and other testing organizations that do very good third-party testing of the results. Sometimes you have to pay for those reports, but if it's an important decision for you, that's often worthwhile. Finally, a lot of large enterprises set up their own test beds to generate test loads to test security products like next generation firewalls or IPS or web application firewalls or whatever. And that can be a very valuable thing to do because it gives you both a way of testing the performance of products, but also a way of testing really key features like evasion. Can they detect attempts to evade the inspection? Setting up your own test bed gives you a lot more flexibility, but it does take more cost and more expertise.
What are the key criteria when testing a next-generation firewall?
The whole reason I started using the term next generation along with firewalls was that the threats continue to evolve and security controls need to evolve to deal with the new threats. So when you're looking at any next generation firewall to determine if it works well, if it's worth upgrading to, really the number one thing is, does it stop new threats? These new threats that use targeted attacks, use evasion techniques, use many ways to get around older, simple state and port protocol type controls. That's number one. So you need to find real life testing with real life threat loads, trying evasion techniques against your potential next generation firewall product. The next thing is to look at its performance under very high loads, both threat loads and traffic loads. A lot of times performance testing chooses a threat load, chooses a network, a good traffic load that's sort of balanced to prove out the highest possible performance of the product. But when the attack hits, you never know if that's going to be during the peak login time or the peak look at the web time, and you do need to look at the effectiveness of a next generation firewall under worst case load conditions as well.